Welcome to Rock That Relationship, a podcast about all things relationship with Corey and Tracy.
Now let's get real and start creating relationships that rock.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Rock That Relationship. Tracy and I are here today to talk more about unique relationship situations and how people navigate their interactions and their connections with people they're in relationship with when there are unique circumstances facing them. And we couldn't have a more unique situation than the one we're about to talk about in this episode. We are so excited to have Jordan Whitley on the show. Jordan is a travel nurse who was featured on the lesbian reality show Tampa Baes on Amazon Prime. Check it out. Awesome show. But we're going to talk a lot today with Jordan about what it was like to be on the show and be in relationship, and talk about how to navigate all those kinds of ins and outs of her kind of daily life, while also being on this show. So Jordan, thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your insight and all of your great experiences with Tracy and I today.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. We watched the show a couple years ago, I think, when it came out.
Yep.
And then we happened to meet someone recently who lives in Tampa, so knew you personally, and that's how we got to have you on the show, which is exciting because we used to watch it in Corey's hot tub. And I'm like, God, we need to move to Tampa.
We were our own Tampa Baes. We were like, in the hot tub.
But we would say, oh my God, if someone was filming, this would be so boring. Like, our lives are so boring. I was recently dating someone who's like, oh, we should have our own show. I'm like, what? Like feeding dogs and
right, watching you go play
hiking.
Pickleball and
Exactly.
me ice my knee.
Yeah, boring. But you guys were not boring at all.
You'd be surprised. I thought going into it, I had the same mentality of like, what do I really have to add to this? I'm like, I'm a nurse and I'm in a stable, healthy relationship, and like, what are we in? It gets spicy. The cameras go on, and so you'd be surprised.
Yeah, well.
Wow.
Well, no one would be surprised. We started this podcast to talk about all of our relationship failures and mistakes, and I'm just right back in one. I've just had another relationship breakup, so people would be into that. I don't know. That's what we're trying to talk about on the podcast. Don't be me. Don't be the train wreck that is. And you were remarkably not a train wreck on that show, although you were close to that. And I'm wondering, like, what drew you to want to be on that show? What did you know about it before you agreed to be on the show?
So it was, what a lot of people don't know is it was in the making years and years before we actually got to that point. I was drunk in what was the lesbian mecca at the time. It was a gay bar in Tampa called Honey Pot. It has since closed during COVID, but I was drunk in Honey Pot, and Brianna and Haley walked up to me and they were like, hey, we're talking to producers and we're trying to get a show. And I'm like, yeah, sure, absolutely. Never thinking that it was ever going to actually become a thing. That was 2018, 2019 rolls around. They're still talking about it. I'm like, okay, yeah. 2020 rolls around, and then they got in contact with our who ended up being our producer, Paul. And they're like, okay, we're going to move forward with this thing. We're going to do these Zoom interviews and everything else. And I'm like, okay. And we do the Zoom interviews. Everything goes well. And then I finally get a call one day at work, and Paul's like, hey, we got a network. And I'm like, okay. He tells me the network. He tells me it's Amazon Prime. I had to sign an NDA before he would even tell me. And I'm like, what am I getting into? I'm literally in the middle of my shift right now.
Right.
And then I was in denial the entire time that this was ever going to happen until we started shooting in April of 2021, until literally March of 2021. I was like, something's going to fall through. But it was really happenstance. I had become friends with Brianna and Haley back in 2017, and we had formed a relationship, and, they were just digging for producers, and I happened to be right place, right time. I knew it was going to be about kind of our friend group and the lesbians there, and the hub of lesbians that Tampa and St. Pete is. But I truly did not ever think that it was really going to happen.
Well, it's so interesting. And
wow.
So it was like a fan. You're just like, sure, I'll do it. But you didn't really think it would happen. So when the show did start getting filmed, was the execution of that different than you imagined? I mean, did you even have any idea like what would happen in the recording of it?
I think the execution, as far as kind of the things that we discussed, and I mean, I could not have guessed the drama that would play out. I couldn't have guessed that portion of it. But even in the Zoom interviews originally, we had discussed possibly coming out to my family, things like that. But the biggest thing was COVID. So you see all the other reality shows and people are just out and about and they're just with cameras following them. Everything with our show had to be so to the T planned because of COVID restrictions. So if we were inside of a building, the entire building had to be rented out. If there's anybody in the background, it's all cast and crew. Like it's like extra camera guys or extra producers. We were COVID tested 5 of the 7 days a week. If there was any extras besides our like core cast that were joining for the Pride party or for my birthday party, they also had to be tested. So there was never any just drop-in people that could stumble upon us and be like, oh, hey, and come on set. Everything was very closed down. And obviously being a nurse at that time, I respected Amazon for how safe they were being, while at the same time, like it was a little frustrating because we didn't really get to showcase true Tampa and St. Pete and what we actually go and do, who our actual friends are. Like we would naturally kind of just send a text in a group chat and there's probably 25 people in it and whoever wants to show up shows up, and it just wasn't as authentic as I would like it to be in that regard, while obviously I understood why. So that was the biggest thing that I think I wasn't expecting. And we just kind of had to go with the flow there.
Well, you all made it look really authentic. Cause I mean, from a viewer perspective, it looked like every time you were at a bar, it was completely packed. And now I could look closer and see like camera packs and microphones.
Well, now I'm going to look. Well, exactly. The one where the mothers were there and then that all went to hell. That was, you know, I was like, oh, that's a packed bar. And it's interesting because sometimes you see the masks that people had would be on a table and sometimes you wouldn't. And you were actually in one scene where you were at one of those bars where you can bring dogs and the dog was standing on the table in front of you. And I think Marissa, right? Yeah. And like, it's like I think it'll be interesting to go back. Like I hadn't even thought of that until you brought it up, like to record during COVID. So it's not as authentic, right? As you would have maybe liked it to be, but it sure did still have a lot. You guys had a lot going on. You have a pretty active life down there.
Yeah. So if we were outdoors, like at Dog Bar, which is where I was just talking to a golden retriever's rear end, or there were a couple, like when me and Shiva went to the coffee shop, if we were outdoors, then we had a little bit more freedom, but definitely if some place was rented, we were inside, it had to be completely rented out. So like Mom's Night Out, we were only shooting in like and we were walking up to it like there's only 12 of us plus the moms. How are we going to but we were only shooting in like the back corner of the bar. And there were ways that they made it look more authentic, but it was definitely a different experience than I was hoping to be able to showcase. I mean, Tampa and St. Pete have so much to offer. So if that's the snippet that you guys got and it was still entertaining, just imagine what it's like without all the restrictions.
See, we need to get there.
Exactly. Well, it was funny. I was just in Tampa like 2 weeks ago and I haven't been to Tampa in years. And then Tracy actually made a comment. She's like, did you hang out with the Tampa Baes? And I was like, ha, ha, ha. And then like literally this whole thing unfolded and you're here within about 10 days of that comment, which was really funny.
Because I said it happened.
So I have a question. I mean, you say right from the very beginning of the show that, you know, you're in a relationship with someone, a long distance relationship. Can you tell us about, I mean, I want to be very, I want to honor the privacy of that other person, but just what it was like sort of being in that kind of a situation with the relationship, being on the show, balancing that, and how that maybe being on the show affected the relationship or how being in the relationship affected the show. Like, share with us whatever you feel comfortable with talking about that impact.
Yeah. So, my ex at the time, we met in October of 2020, and we started filming in April of 2021. So again, at this point, I'm still in denial that any of this is happening. We start dating. She discloses to me that she, is a pretty private person, even with social media, her own personal social media. Like, it's just very closed down because of her profession, which I completely respected. And I kind of had been one of those in the past who just blast my relationship everywhere. So I was like, oh, this will be a little bit different. Like, I don't mind the privacy. But once things started to unfold and I was like, okay, this might be a real thing, I disclosed to her, like, hey, me and my friends might do a little thing, which she was not thrilled about at the beginning. And it was definitely a discussion that we had to have as far as how we were going to move forward, because she was very clear that she wanted no part of it, that she wanted to continue with me and wanted to support me as best as she could, but she did not want any part of it. And to the extent that, like, the producers at one point, they were like, well, she doesn't have to actually be on it, but it'll kind of be like, when Kanye calls Kim, like,
right.
he's not actually on the Kardashians, but, every now and then you'll get his voice on the phone. And she's like, did they just compare me to Kanye? Which, like, again, I'm still in denial at this point. I didn't realize that our executive producer and our, like, head of audio work for the Kardashians and have worked for the Kardashians for years. So I'm not, like, even realizing the scope of what's going on here, but I'm like, yeah, sure, she'll be like Kanye, but she was like, still absolutely not. So we agreed to move forward. We were still early in our relationship, but lesbians move quite quickly. So we were like, yeah, we're in this for the long haul. We came up with a plan. I addressed it with our friends, the castmates, that a lot of them had met her previously, that we would be addressing her by a fake name, that we would not be disclosing her actual job. And I discussed that with production as well. And at first they were a little bit hesitant, but I was like, listen, like, I want to be a part of this, but you also have to respect that I am not going to force anybody that's in my life to also be a part of it. And you also can't force them to be a part of it. And so there were a lot of times that we would be filming and either she would be there, like she would drop me off, or she would be there in the background. She just wouldn't obviously be on camera, or she would be visiting. We were long distance. She'd be visiting and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to set. I'll see you in 2 hours. And then, I'd come home, we'd go to dinner. So during filming, it didn't really affect our relationship too much. And even afterwards, I feel like there was a lull. We stopped filming in June, and then the show didn't air until November. So there was a lull of like, when is this going to come out? What is it going to be like? And then when it finally aired, I was actually just talking about this. When it finally aired, the night that it aired, it was me, Summer, Marissa, and Summer's high school friend that were watching it all together on the couch. And we're like at episode 3, and it aired at midnight. And so we're like middle of the night, but we're just powering through it. And all of a sudden I hear Summer and Marissa's door open, and I'm like, who is coming in the middle of the night? Who is entering your home? And it was my ex. We called her Nicole on the show. Nicole was, walking in the door, and she was like, I wanted to be here to watch the premiere with you. She was like, I had to finish up at work, but, and drove through the night straight to Summer's house so she could watch it with us. So she was extremely supportive during it. Even afterwards, there was just a lot that went on between castmates and drama and everything else, like extremely, extremely supportive of the entire process. And I really don't feel as though the show and me being on the show really negatively impacted our relationship. It was interesting to navigate, to say the least.
Well, they did a great job, because I just rewatched the whole series, and there's never, I don't even remember the fake name being used, but maybe once, but like, it was clear you were in a relationship. It's clear the person lived farther away and was a woman. So I think that was done well. And now you keep saying ex. So did you guys split up eventually?
Yeah. So in, I want to say May of 2022 is when we split up for good. And that was just, honestly, I talked to her right before we started this. I was like, I'm going on a podcast and chat about you. I was like, don't worry, you're still Nicole, you're still a teacher, like, still respecting your privacy, but we're still good friends. She we just wanted different things. Our lives were going in different directions. I think one of the biggest things was I, at the time, was not ready to give up travel nursing. And she wanted to settle down. She wanted to have kids. And I just wasn't willing to compromise. I could go anywhere and get paid, $6-7 a week.
Right.
And, we were just at different places. And so she kind of saw the writing on the wall. I did not. I was stuck in the, we'll figure it out. And she was like, no, I don't think we're going to. And it was a hard pill to swallow because it was the healthiest relationship I had ever been in. But it ended up being a pretty amicable breakup. And like I said, we're still friends to this day. She wished my mom a happy Mother's Day. Like it's all good now.
Good. That's interesting. Corey, did you want to say something? I'm always chattering.
No, jump in because I have a follow up to that. But
I'm just going to say I just went through pretty much the same thing of just I was thinking, oh, this is going great, and then the other person's like, no, this isn't what I want, and it's very hard and it's very lesbian. I like to stay friends. The person that is leaving my house currently, like, she's having a harder time with that. And having a podcast, when we met, she's a much more private person. She doesn't want me talking about her business. And I was like, I have a podcast where I literally talk about my relationship and I do stand up. I'm like, it's hard.
Yeah.
You got to be very careful and respectful of the other person. And yet, like, this story of the relationship is your story. It's, it's my story as well. Right. And I think that's to agree to be on a reality show, whether you think it's going to happen or not, but then you go forward with it, or you have a podcast about your relationships. It's interesting because I think people have an impression. I have a friend who was like, reality shows are, destroying America. And I'm like, you don't actually watch them very much because it's like really true, right? Like, yes, there was all the drama. But you see that people in that show, you talked about coming out to your grandparents, I think, right? Your mom was supportive and like real things happen on those shows.
Yeah. And I think I always tell people, like, you just have to get through episode 2.5. But there are a lot of heartfelt moments. There's, we sit down with Shiva's mom and we talk about what it's like being gay in the Middle East and just like what that dynamic is like. I come out to my grandparents. Haley talks about, her trauma with the church. And so I think there are in between all of the messy nonsense that like, I would have loved to display lesbians in a little bit of a different light than like the drama portions, while at the same time we do get to talk about things that so many people do actually struggle with in real life. And that was one of the main reasons why I decided to even do the show. I knew my coming out story, me being a Black gay woman in America, like I knew that there was some type of perspective that somebody would be able to relate to. And having messages afterwards, having so many people reach out and say, I could relate to your coming out story, or, asking for advice. It was worth all of the nonsense. So, yeah.
Well, I love that. And it's interesting because it's so much of the same reason why Tracy and I did start this podcast too. It's like, we wanted to put ourselves out there so other people would know that they're not alone. And so your story matters, and you have a lot more viewership than we have listenership. But the idea
because
is
we don't have the drama.
Well,
people want the drama. Like
they do. They do.
Right.
Yeah.
But she said, like, you said, like, you'd rather portray lesbians in a different light, but that's the reality. And what people want is, you can't give a message or get the points across about, like, I'm not going to care about your story or Summer's story or something until I'm invested. And what am I going to be invested in? It's the age old thing of like, it's sort of voyeurship, but it's also like, hey, you're a professional. I'm a professional. Corey's a professional. And yet our lives are still messy. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you don't feel so alone in the world. I think that's why those shows are so popular. It really affected me. We literally watched that show together, and
and I remember thinking, wow, we need to go to Tampa. But
and then you did go to Tampa, and
then I did go to Tampa, and I didn't.
Exciting.
I didn't hang out with you all. I do have a question for you though, Jordan, because now that you're talking about like the you and your ex went separate ways. have you re-entered into the dating world? And if you have, has this show been like do people know that you're on this, and does that make a difference, or have you just been single and sort of been doing that?
No, I have re-entered the dating world. I did have a brief relationship last year. I was single for about a year before I re-entered into a relationship. But it was an interesting dynamic to just kind of work through re-entering the dating space after the show aired, because I'm having conversations with people, and at first I'm very naive. I'm going into these, dates or whatever, and I'm just like, oh, like I found this person attractive, they found me attractive, now we're sitting down at dinner. And then one of the very first like real dinner dates I went on, I'm sitting there talking to somebody about, what is your family like? Are you out to your entire family? And they asked me the question, and I was like, well, yeah, I was out to everybody except for my grandparents until last year. And then I came out to them, and her response was, yeah, I know, I watched it. And I'm like, okay. And so it's just, it's hard navigating, when I'm having conversations, do people, even in friendships as well, but do people already kind of know these facts about me? And that just because you watch somebody on reality TV does not mean that you know them whatsoever. But, there are just little tidbits that you may already know. And also trying to navigate, like, does this person like me for me? Are they liking me because they want to be able to say they dated somebody on TV? And so just kind of having to sift through all of those things. It has added a layer to the dating realm. Like right now I'm single, and I'm on Hinge. And I'm like, are people swiping because they're like, hey, she's cute, or like, hey, that's Jordan from Tampa Baes. Like which one is it? And so, yeah, it's been interesting. But I think I have a decent handle on it. Typically people that have some sense will like stop me and they'll be like, I know you're a nurse. I did watch the show, or like, I watched an episode. Like, I do appreciate when people say that up front, because then I'm not just talking nonsense that they already know. And I feel weird because you know things that, so yeah, it's been.
Do you ever disclose that? Like, so when you say they'll say it up front, is that like, if you're on a dating app and then you're just messaging first, do you put it out there? Do they say it, or does it always come out like after you've decided to meet up in person?
It is never something that I address, because I never want to be that person that's like, hey, I was on TV. Like, that is icky to me. Because that's not my entire personality. That's something that I did for 3 months. Cool. Like, I would truly rather talk about my career in softball than the 3 months I was on TV. And so it's never something that I address right out front. It's often more so something that comes up later in conversation. When she doesn't have to, I don't need somebody to message me and be like, hey, I think you're cute, and also I watched you on TV. But like, before we start getting to the nitty gritty and I start opening up and it's like, yeah, I already know all of these things. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it's been interesting, and I'm still single. I'm still navigating those
singleness is fine. And I talk about this all the time on the podcast. Growing up, I thought I'm going to meet that one person. I'm going to be that in a relationship for the rest of my life. And no, that has not happened. And I think since my divorce, I've been in 3 relationships that seem to be getting progressively shorter and shorter. And, maybe that's like, while I'm sad about it, maybe it's part of the process, right? And there's no shame in being single, and there's no shame in like, dating. We've talked about dating apps also. And I feel for you being on an app, right? I did get on Hinge. I didn't like it, but like, it's hard. It's really hard. It's hard. And then you have the extra layer of being semi, known or semi-famous. And then people are expecting a certain thing out of you. But I think that happens whether you're a reality person or not. And I think we all come put like our expectations on somebody else, and then we're surprised. I mean, that's what I'm dealing with now, like until you live with someone, or until like really the things happen in life that make it difficult to navigate, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I often get from people, and not necessarily people that I'm dating, just people that I meet, but I often get from people like, wow, you're a lot nicer than I thought. And I'm like, I'm a person. Like, I'm not Brad Pitt or like some A-list celebrity.
Right.
I never use the word famous. And when people are always like, oh, you're famous, like God,
Right.
no. But I'm still a person, and I did this so that I could help other people, and so that hopefully my story would help other people. And so when I come across people and, I'm willing to sit there and talk to them about their coming out story, or, answer their questions, they're like, wow, you're a lot nicer than I thought you were going to be. And I'm like, I'm not gonna, like to your point, like people have these expectations, and then, I apparently am chatty Cathy when I'm out and about, because they're like, I didn't even expect you to give me the time of day. I'm like, I'm a nurse. I like people. Like
I don't think you come off. I don't think you come off that way at all. I mean, I think you come off as very genuine. I think, you were like a side participant to the drama, I think mostly, which, that's hard to navigate on camera. We know this show, there was picking sides between two couples, and I don't think anyone could have navigated that with like, well, this is great, Disney, I mean, it was, it got pretty crazy for, a little bit of that.
Yeah. It got even crazier off camera. So you guys got a very small snippet of what actually went on.
I'm getting on and getting my ticket to Tampa right now.
Corey
and I, let's go back with our podcast microphones and get everybody.
And my book. So I'm
telling you, it's a drama. It's a drama that draws in, but I think that's a wrong perception. But I do think that's a problem if people don't really learn how to communicate or talk, when they meet somebody, anybody, and, they're going to have that perception. Like, I can't handle a resting bitch face. When I see it, I like lose my mind. Right. And that's usually just an introverted person who's chilling. And I'm like, what is the problem here? Why do you not, care about me? And so it's like all that. I think it's very analogous to relationships, just, in general. Like, you were on a show. They're going to pick what they're going to show anyway. Plus, you're being filmed. I mean, how is that to know? I mean, we're being filmed right now. Am I acting differently? Did you act differently?
I mean, after that night when it premiered, me, Summer, and Marissa were sitting there. We watched all 8 episodes, and it finished, and we all looked at each other and we go, I liked that. Like, I feel like I represented myself well. They felt like they represented themselves well. We felt as though the rest of the cast, like, we didn't feel like there was any. You can see when you're watching like The Bachelor or like Bravofied shows, when there are like clear villains and there's clear kind of editing, production. Like, we watched it and we were like, that was pretty accurate. Like that actually, that the math is mathing there.
Right.
So yeah, no, I don't feel like I acted any different. I definitely think there was an adjustment period, just having a camera sitting in your face. Like, I'm trying to have a conversation and there's lights, there's camera. There were also moments that people would always ask if it's scripted, and it wasn't scripted in the sense of like, no, we would sit down, we would have a conversation, but there were also moments when production definitely wanted to hit on something specific. So I would be having a conversation with Marissa, let's say, and I can see Fallon, which is one of our producers, I can see her in the background just like moving around with like on her phone, like, ask her about this. And I'm like,
right. So then you come off, right? You're
about the party this weekend. Like, know, and so there were definitely moments that were a little bit more guided. But I don't feel like in any way our conversations, our actions, were any different than they are in real life.
Well, and I have to say, I know we're not that into gossip. I am a little bit, but like, I am surprised, I have seen that one couple is still together and another is not, and I'm surprised at the one who's not together. That really surprises me. And it saddens me, but it also makes me feel better about myself that two people who seem so perfect for each other and so perfectly matched and so in love, that sometimes there's just things greater than yourselves that get in the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's, they're that couple's business to speak on. Obviously, I'm closely linked with them. But I mean, life happens, and everybody can have their opinions and their hearsay and everything else. But at the end of the day, it's like we said, it's reality TV. You only know like so much of what goes on. And even the people that are here in Tampa that see us all the time, that see us every day, not just, me and Summer, Marissa, even, Shiva and her girlfriend, like there are plenty of people that don't know a lot of just what goes on behind the scenes, even here. So, dealing with navigating relationships while being on a reality show, navigating breakups while being on a reality show. I went through a breakup, which obviously it was much more hidden than some other breakups that happened, because I wasn't displaying my relationship to begin with. So I would go to events and people would be like, so are you guys still together or are you getting married? They had no clue whatsoever what was going on. It's difficult, but I think, yeah, like I said, it's life and it's a reality. Sometimes things just don't work out. That doesn't necessarily mean that, anybody is a bad person, or, it doesn't even have to, like me and my ex, it ended very amicably and we're still in each other's lives. So, yeah, you never know what's going to happen.
Well, and I like the idea that, we talk about this stuff is messy. Life is messy. And, it's on film and you're watching it and you're like, okay, I can relate to this. I can relate to this friend group, or I can relate to this scenario, or I can relate to this struggle. But there's also something really, I don't know, it's sort of interesting and almost beautiful, the unfolding afterwards, because, I'm assuming people do, because we did, you Google you all a year out and say, where are they now? Right. And they want to know. And so part of it is also the reality of the fact that, like Tracy was saying, some couples just don't stay together, even if they seem like they would, or this person ended up going and doing this. And it's like, the messiness continues even when the camera's shut off. And there is something, while that is kind of drama filled, there is something kind of reassuring to the rest of humanity about that, is the fact that we're all just people at the end of the day. And this stuff happens to everyone. And so you're, this going back to this idea of you're not alone. And I really like that kind of idea about how the reality shows work just in general, is that it just doesn't end when the camera's off.
Oh yeah. No, not at all. And I think sometimes people forget, like, truly that we are people, and so navigating situations where there is a breakup or there is a friend breakup or whatever it is, there were so many times that I would go through my comments, I would go through other cast members' comments, and I'm like, these are really personal questions to just be like putting on someone's public profile. And so I think it is like important to remind people that we are still human, and like we also deserve grace and we deserve privacy, even though we chose to put our life very much out there for everyone to see. At the same time, like we deserve the respect of like being able to navigate things in private and not having to answer to a stranger from Australia that watched us for 8 hours. Like, if we're going through a breakup, we stop following one of the other cast members, something like that. Like, I don't have to answer Johnny 101 about whatever the question is, because, I'm a human just also trying to navigate the human experience.
So knowing all that and having experienced that, would you get on another reality show? Or would you be on season 2 of the Tampa Baes if they ever did one?
That is the age-old question. If there was a season 2 of Tampa Baes, there would definitely have to be some changes for me to agree to do that. Some cast member changes. But I would do another reality show for sure. I have been a Big Brother and Challenge super fan for as long as I can remember. So if there's any of those producers, casting,
listening,
crew, holler at your girl. But no, I would absolutely do it again. I think it definitely, it opened my eyes to now when I watch other reality shows, I can sit there and I can watch somebody's confessional and be like, they made them re-say that. Or like, you know, I can just spot moments that before I'd be like, why would they say that? Or that just sounded so forced or whatever. And now I understand, you know, I would be talking, doing my confessional and the producers would be like, okay, say that again, but like shorter or say it like this. And it was what I said. It was exactly what I said, just like condensed or, you know, said in a more catchy way. So it'd be like a little catchphrase. It wasn't changing what I said. It was just, I don't know, for a one-liner or something like that. And so I can notice things now, and I feel like I would be more prepared going into something else. If I did ever venture down that road again.
Well, yeah. And who knows, you could be on a reality show where you win like $1 million in the end too, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so, I would love that option.
Right.
So would I, if there's any producer listening.
Yeah, exactly. So if, you know, going back to like this idea of social media and sort of this post-production thing is, you know, the show airs, and you had Johnny 100 or 101, whatever, who was like reaching out to you. What was the kind of feedback you got on social media? And kind of more like, did you have a lot of support? Do you have questions or people sharing their stories, or did you have some negative stuff happen? Or what was the kind of the chatter that was mostly in your inboxes?
So I know some of the other cast members dealt with some like negative blowback. I personally, still to this day, have not received a single negative DM or message or comment or anything, which I am thankful for, extremely thankful for. My mental health is very happy for that. But I honestly, I got a lot of questions, either comments about, you know, I could relate to your coming out story. Thank you for sharing. I did get quite a few questions regarding like, hey, this is my situation. What do you think I should do? And I welcomed those questions, while at the same time, I was very careful because I had a lot of teenagers reaching out to me and they were like, hey, I want to come out to my family. This is the situation. And as much as I would love to help them, I cannot in like my good sense tell a 16-year-old who does not have any type of like financial backing, hey, yeah, come out to your family who might kick you out of the house. So that was something that was rough to navigate, because yes, I want everybody to be able to live their authentic self, but at the same time, I don't want some LGBTQ youth to end up on the streets because of my advice. So that was interesting to navigate. I think there were a lot of also comments about, you know, people were excited and happy that most of us, pretty much everybody, had a real career. It wasn't just like daddy's money running around on yachts, and like there were a bunch of nurses on the show. You know, everybody had like a at least a real job, if not a career. So that there were a lot of comments about that, and just saying, you know, I'm so glad that, you know, it's a reality show of people that, you know, do something real for a living. There was a little bit of blowback as far as just in general, not specifically to me, but, you know, to the pages or the show's page, about the lack of diversity, which I understood where that critique was coming from, while at the same time, half of our cast were people of color. We were people of like tone, lighter color. But you know, we had Shiva, who's Iranian, me and Mac were half black, or I don't know how Mac identifies and what her like family history is, but I know that she is partially black. You know, Mel is Israeli. Like there were so many people that had some type of culture and diversity, just skin tone was not represented as Tampa truly is. And so I can understand that critique, while at the same time, we were trying to portray an actual authentic friend group. And so if we were bringing people in just for the sake of diversity, that kind of skirted away from what the actual point of the show was. And I 1000% agree that we need to obviously diversify TV in general, and that Tampa is significantly more diverse than what was shown on the show. It just so happened to be that is what our friend group looked like, while also our friend group is half people of color as shown. So that was one of the harder things for me personally to navigate, because I understood where the critique was coming from, but I also felt as though it's like, okay, well, I'm not trying to speak for all of Black Tampa. Right. That's not, that's not the role that I stepped into. But I am Black. I'm here. Right. So that was probably the only negative feedback that I really had to deal with. And I kind of addressed it on some podcasts and radio shows that we had as best as I could. That was...
And I think, that's whatever anybody does, they'll be critiquing, right? And you're not the producer, and it is about a group of people. And if you came here to our group of people, Tucson is very white or Latino, but they're very distinct. It's not this, mostly Tucson, in my opinion, is extremely white, and it's just that way. I don't know why it ended up being that way. And I feel like, okay, if you're going to follow a group of people around, then show them for what they really are, And I thought it was diverse, but that's because I can see, an Iranian person and a Greek person and a Black person and, Latina person and a Native American person and, So I feel like people are going to say what they want to say. Just in relationship, right?
And I think too that the probably the idea of filming during COVID, where you wouldn't have been able to pan the scene of a bar where it would probably be a diverse group of people, like all of that probably factored into it. But
absolutely,
excellent point. I did have a question, like in terms of other people, like kind of reaching back out to you or reaching out to any of the castmates, if you know of this, is the kind of the weird stuff. Like, I know that even we've gotten it with the podcast, which is people who you message us privately and feel like they are like our friends, but we don't even know them. They're like listeners and they chat with us and they kind of like feel like we have a friendship with them. And I don't think they're intending to be kind of creepy, but it's sort of a little alarming. Did you have any?
See, I don't find it creepy.
I find it a little unnerving because I don't know this person and they know me. Yeah. And so I'm wondering, and clearly we have this like minuscule podcast compared to your reality show, but did you have any of that where people just kind of assumed you had this friendship and that they knew you?
It's not only in messages, it's in real life. And I use this example all the time because this really actually happened. And this was one of the moments that I was just like, do people not... it was St. Pete Pride of last year, and I was walking down the sidewalk, walking past a Starbucks, and a girl came out of the Starbucks, like arms wide open, and she's like, oh my God, hey. And initially my first thought is, oh my God, I must have met this girl when I was drunk, or like, I just don't remember her face. I don't remember her name, and I feel so bad. And so I hugged her and I was like, I'm so sorry. I don't remember you. Like, when did we meet? And she's like, oh no, we haven't met. You were just on the show. And I'm like, right. Okay. The number of times that has happened of people just like approaching, giving me a hug, and my first thought is never the show. Like I have kind of just moved on with my life. I half the time forget it ever happened. And so I'm always like, oh, I forgot your name. Like, my bad.
You're a nurse. It could be family members,
Yeah. And so that happens so often. And then I backtrack afterwards. I'm not like a touchy-feely person. If you were not my girlfriend or my mother, I don't want to hug you. Like it's not me. I'm one of those that'll just like wave or Irish goodbye, so I don't have to do the hug. And so it's just, it's interesting. My friends know that about me, but obviously a stranger wouldn't know that about me. And if I saw, I don't know, trying to think of somebody, Lizzo on the street, I wouldn't run up to Lizzo and be like, hey girl, and give her a hug. Like I have the, I don't know, social intelligence awareness.
But what if Lizzo walked up to you and gave you a hug?
Absolutely. Bring it in. Bring it in. But it's a strange, like, I just personally would never do that, like to any stranger, and definitely not somebody who, I have only just seen on TV. So I think that has been, yes, I've gotten the messages and like people, that kind of think that they know what's going on in my life, but obviously don't, or think they know what's going on in our friend group in general. But the weirder ones are the people that like come up to you in the bar and just like throw their arm around you. And I'm like, do we know each other? Hello. That one always throws me because I'm like, I would never.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow.
I have one more question. So if you did go back on a reality show and you were dating someone at the time, how much weight would you give to their opinion of like whether they wanted you on it or not? Like,
it depends on how far I am into the relationship. I have given up a lot of things in my life because of my relationships. I gave up a career. I've moved places or not moved places for relationships. And so I'm kind of at a point now, I just turned 30. I'm kind of at a point now where I want to live my life for me. And if it's something that I want to do and it's not hurting anybody else, it's not hurting my relationship, I'm not disrespecting the relationship, I'm still willing to put in the effort. I don't see why I can't continue on the path that I'm on. Obviously I would take whatever my partner's concerns are into, I would take that into consideration. It would be a conversation. But I really am trying to make an effort to do more for me. So, with that being said, I don't know. If we're like 2.5 years in, we're engaged and they're like, absolutely not, like, I'm leaving you, we would have to have a serious conversation about like, you did this. What is a camera,
right.
If we're 2 months in and they're like, absolutely not, I'm like, see you later. Back on Hinge I go. Cause no, and I can't afford to keep putting my life and my needs on the back burner for somebody who's potentially temporary.
Well, you're figuring that. It took me to be over 50 and I still haven't figured that out. So you're 23 years ahead of like my development. And I think that's great. And I think all of these life experiences, right? And relationships teach you that. And it's hard. It's really hard to be in relationships in this day and age also, I think, with all the things happening. And it's like, I keep course correcting and I overcorrected this time where I was like, I'm going to keep myself because I've moved for people. I've given up everything for people. And then this time I wasn't. But I went too far, right? Like I kept too much independence. So it's very difficult. It's a very hard thing to do.
Yeah. And I think I struggled with that same thing with Nicole, the girl that I was dating when I was on the show. I overcorrected. And so I would make what kind of were maybe selfish decisions. But I was so tired of just continually giving up things. And I still, there were still conversations that we had. I was travel nursing and I was staying in a very close radius to her as opposed to going to California. I really wanted to go out west. I didn't do that, but there were still definitely things that, decisions that I made that were a little bit more on the selfish side. And I can look back and be like, yeah, I probably overcorrected. Same thing there. And so trying to find like the happy medium of don't be a doormat and also don't be a jerk. So,
right. Well, I haven't found it yet, as everybody in my life knows. So it's hard.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like this whole experience was really in some ways kind of help you clarify some of your wants, your needs and things. So what would you say if you could pinpoint it down to a few of the lessons you learned or things you learned about yourself through the process of being on the show?
I learned that I definitely do not do well in high pressure, chaotic situations. And especially if there is a camera there. I enjoy fading into the background and just kind of dancing the issues away. And so that was definitely, I did my best to hold my ground for the sake of my friends while also like still enjoy my time, which was difficult to navigate. But, I learned that I really, really enjoy, Shiva a whole lot. Like we had been friends for years and years. But her and I grew definitely through that experience, definitely grew closer. Not that I ever questioned, whether or not I enjoyed being around her, but it was definitely a growing experience for our friendship. What else? I can't even I learned, that I definitely, communication. Communication was a big thing that I also learned on and off camera. There were some things that didn't end up making any of the edits because there was just too much backstory that they would have to cover and things that maybe other people weren't comfortable talking about. But I definitely grew in like interpersonal communication and just addressing things up front because I was like, okay, well, there's cameras here and I'm not dealing with the awkwardness, so let's get right to it. So that was definitely something that, I don't know, it kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone because I'm typically somebody that I don't completely avoid conflict, but I don't love it. Whereas I was just like, let's just confront this and move forward because I can't keep doing the awkwardness. So.
Well, and you were never a conflict creator. You know, you were right on the edges sometimes, and giving your opinion, but you were never creating it. I never saw you create any drama.
Try not to be. Try not to, throw drinks and do all that nonsense. But
so do you think that that's like, if you carry that over into your off-camera life, like, do you think you approach conflict differently now, or do you really need someone to like, here, quick, put a camera in my face because I really need to talk to this person about that. You really need to be honest, and it helps with the camera.
No, I think that I learned through that experience because it also, like, I didn't realize how much that was going to affect the show and just the experience itself and the chaos and the up and down, how much that was going to affect my mental health. And I definitely have carried with me just confronting things so my nervous system can calm down. And, some people it's abrasive or aggressive, but to me, I'm like, if I can address something head on and stop having this pit in my stomach, whatever it is, I would rather do that for everybody's sake, because nobody needs anxious Jordan walking around. Nobody wants to deal with, my moodiness when I'm trying to. So if I can just address something head on, again, sometimes people are like, whoa, but they're just not used to direct communication, which, I mean, there are a lot of people into their 30s, into their 40s that they are not used to that. And especially here in Tampa, people like to talk in circles or talk in group chats, not directly to you.
Well, believe me, it goes into your 50s and above. So
yeah, that's a good lesson to learn. Well, so what are you up to these days? You told us a little bit, you're still travel nursing,
yes.
And you're single. That's what I've picked up so far. What other things are on the horizon for you next?
I am finishing up a contract here. I'm in Clearwater right now, finishing up a contract here, and then I would like to go out west. I'm looking Arizona, Seattle, somewhere out there. My sister came to live with me, so she is in the other room. I texted her. I was like, I'm doing a podcast. Please don't come in here. But she came to live with me. The other one just graduated high school. She is coming down here. So the whole gang will be here. I got a trip coming up. Well, I'm actually going to see some family today and then going hiking, mostly just traveling. Like, I just want to get out. And I want to go hiking. We're supposed to go to Hawaii and to Utah. I just want to see things, see the world. And then the biggest thing is I'm trying to buy a house. So that will be my next big step.
In Tampa, or keeping you
in St. Pete.
Uh-huh.
In St. Pete. Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'll buy a house, and hopefully both my sisters will move in there and hold down the fort while I'm out traveling. But that's, just normal life things.
Yeah. Well, if you end up coming out to Arizona, we have excellent hiking here. Tracy and I hike all the time. So
yes, and you're welcome to stay here. Got an extra room now that I'm single. Oh, and I might be in Seattle also, so we'll see what happens. But you're welcome here anytime, and
Yep, I'll hit you guys up whenever I'm out there. Sedona is my favorite place on the entire planet. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm actually headed to Albuquerque Sunday, so I'm gonna go do some hiking out there.
That's so funny. My partner's leaving for Albuquerque next week as well, and she'll be out hiking.
Oh, wow.
So you might run into
maybe
each other.
they'll run into each other.
I'll tell her to look out for you.
Yeah, I'll wave to her on the trail.
Exactly.
But she's also the private one, so we're not talking about her on our podcast.
The fact that I even brought her up.
Exactly.
Oh,
Corey,
trouble.
get yourself in check.
Exactly. Anyways, Jordan, well, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your willingness to just share your experiences, just your insight, what you've learned, and giving our listeners an opportunity to hear about some real life stuff that happens behind the scenes and how that impacts the way that we show up in the world with ourselves and with our, in our relationships. So I really am just grateful that you've taken the time to be here with us today.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely.
Me too.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I enjoyed this so much. A little blast from the past to talk about the show, but
season 2 is going to come up.
It's real life stuff. You guys are going to be on season 2. You got to get
there. You go.
Well,
get down here.
We'll fly out. I will definitely fly out.
I'll trade my Tucson house for Tampa. That's a lot more fun.
Go.
Yeah.
There you go. Anyways, well, again, thank you so much for being here. And for all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to yet another episode. And until our next one, go out there and rock those relationships. If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship, and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.